I certainly understand that some have chosen to attack the integrity of the Justice Department as components and its employees by claiming that we do not treat like cases alike. This constitutes an attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy and essential to the safety of the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Nothing.
You've all heard me say many times
We've heard you say it.
Make our cases based on the facts and the law. These are not just words.
Oh, yeah.
These are what we live by. They're the foundation.
These are not just words. Listen to my words when I tell you that these are not just words, as I say the words that are just words, but I'm telling you they're not just words.
Of the way we make these decisions. The agents of the FBI, as well as the DEA, the ATF, our deputy U.S. Marshals, every day, often at great personal risk, protect the American people and secure its safety. Our cases are based on their work. I could not be more proud to work with them.
It's not like I'm a master body language reader. I just know that he's lying. I mean, he's lying because we have recent evidence that what he's saying is not true. But I just want to point out his intonations.
I certainly understand that some have chosen to attack the integrity of the Justice Department as components and its employees by claiming that we do not treat like cases alike.
We know that you do not treat like cases alike, Merrick Garland, but it's an attack on the institution.
This constitutes an attack on an institution that is essential to American democracy.
Is or was an attack on an institution. When you attack Fauci, you're attacking science. When you criticize Fauci, you are undermining science itself. When you attack Merrick Garland, you are undermining justice itself, because they are just, they are good, they have no problems, they do everything right. He's very proud of them. And if you have a problem with it, you're the one to blame. And how dare you attack justice and attack democracy and the very institution that is there to ensure your safety, even if it means locking up people that they've entrapped, framed, judged too harshly. It's for your own protection. So everything that they do, even if it's wrong, is right. Don't you see?
And essential to the safety of the American people. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Nothing could be further from the truth, Merrick Garland. And by the way, not only is it an attack on democracy if you criticize the Justice Department or Merrick Garland, it's also anti-Semitic, apparently. Did anybody even know that Merrick Garland was Jewish? Did I put... Oh, here we go. After the Mar-a-Lago raid, the ADL sees an alarming number of anti-Semitic threats targeting Merrick Garland. Put Merrick Garland, both by physique and by name, and in all of my identifying members of the tribe, as we used to say in the industry, you know, Roseanne Barr, I remember being flabbergasted when I realized and discovered Roseanne Barr was Jewish. Pee Wee Herman, mind blown. The Beastie Boys, but Merrick Garland, I mean, I was criticizing Merrick Garland before I knew he was Jewish. It's an attack on institutions, people. You attack Merrick Garland, it's anti-Semitic, even if you had not the slightest notion that Merrick Garland was Jewish to begin with. It's a way, some people call it pathological narcissism, of blaming the victims of abuse. Let me rephrase this. The abuser blaming the victims of their abuse, of abusing the abusers. Merrick Garland coming out and saying, if you criticize the Justice Department that strikes sweetheart deals with the crackhead son of felonious gun application lying, whatever else was on that computer. By the way, stick around this week. We're going to have probably Marco Polo on to talk about the report. If you think that that's sweetheart deal that no one in their right mind would have ever given to any other ordinary citizen under any realm, if you treat like cases alike, the FBI falsifying evidence and submitting it to the FISA court, no, we treat like cases alike. Oh, we're sorry we did that. We put in protocol to know that we shouldn't break the law anymore when trying to prosecute people. And if you dare criticize them, you criticize Fauci for lying about gain of function, for lying about a slew of other things, you're attacking the science. You criticize Garland, you're attacking justice, and you're attacking all of the Hebrew people. Can't criticize them. Can't criticize them. And if you do, you ungrateful bastard, you're the problem. Oh. I did not know that Paul Rubens was Jewish because I didn't know that that was Pee Wee Herman's real name growing up. But it's like, for good and for bad. Jared Fogle didn't want to know. Upset. Harvey Weinstein, we knew Harvey Weinstein was Jewish. Woody Allen, yeah, we knew. What's his name there? The guy Wiener with the computer stuff. We knew him. Somewhat genuinely surprising ones, and then the Billy Madison song, not the Billy Madison, the Adam Sandler song, the Hanukkah song, gave you the whole other list. And then you grow up and you realize, never mind, we're going to get in trouble. Okay, everybody, it's an earlier than normal stream today because Barnes has some travel plans. I hope he's going to make it. He's going to make it. Barnes has some travel plans. We're going to start early. 2 of my kids went to summer camp. Sleepaway. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. It's a weird thing. Every parent wants their kids to be independent. You want them to be able to survive on their own. You want them to have the best experiences in life. But growing up, going to sleepaway camp wasn't always a fun thing. You go there, you get homesick, you want to come home. I can still feel that homesickness. The sorrow. You wake up in the middle of the night and all you want is to smell your mother's deodorant. Secret, don't ask, it's a long story. But you want your kids to be independent, but then there's a part of you also that likes the dependency. It gives you meaning in life. It gives you something to do. Also, it's a bit of a window into the empty nest when, like, okay, the kids are out of the house. What the hell do I do with myself? I mean, I'm lucky. I got what to do with myself. But you feel abandoned. You feel sort of alone, like you've lost a massive aspect of purpose of your life, which is to cater to these ungrateful children. I was going to call them rats, but children. So I have some conflicting emotions right now. But all that to say, conflicting emotions. Emotional damage. All right, so what do we have on today? It's going to be an amazing show, but before we get into any of it, standard disclaimers. These wonderful things that you see here, Patsy Fox, a $10 super sticker. YouTube takes 30% of super chats. These are called super chats. We're simultaneously streaming on Rumble. Rumble ordinarily takes 20% of their equivalent called Rumble Rants, except for the rest of the year, they're taking nothing. So 100% goes to the creator. But even when they go back to taking their 20%, you're better off supporting us if you want to on a platform that supports free speech and supporting the Rumble platform, the Rumble movement that is #RumbleOn. I started that one. I'm going to read a few more of these. Pasha Moyer, when I hear people like Garland speak, what do you mean people, Pasha? I'm joking. I can just feel part of my brain rotting away. Thanks for stopping the video before it's too late. Well, I stopped it on the second time around. JRC1, I read this one caption, a prelude, so to speak. What's more important, solid food, truth, or taste good food, feeling? What we digest, absorb is what we are and who we are. Agreed. So to explain the format to anybody, Viva, I will send a multi-rant later, could use help. Okay, we'll do. I'm not your buddy guy, thank you. The protocol for the week, by the way. Let them fly. If you love them, let them go. Oh, oh. That's a Tom McDonald song, but I'm terrible at it. What was I just about to say? I totally forgot. The protocol for how this goes for those of you who are new. We start off on YouTube, Rumble, and we're on Locals live with our private stream there, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Because I have exclusivity with Rumble, I end on YouTube after about 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes, and we go over exclusively to Rumble and Locals. We finish up the stream on Rumble and Locals, and then we end on Rumble, and then we go over to our community on Locals, which is highly above average, or at least slightly above average. And we have our Locals after party where we take tips there, questions there. And so you can join support as a non-paying member on vivabarneslaw.locals.com if you want. You can also support us there. $7 a month, $70 a year. And some people actually support with more than that, even though they don't have to. There's tons of exclusive content for supporters, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But the membership is open for everybody. We have like 107,000 non-paying members, and it's a great community. Tons of stuff for everybody. You can also go to vivafry.com and get some merch if you so choose. So the link to Rumble is in the pinned comment. Is that all the housekeeping that I have to do for today? We're not done with the opening rant yet, people. In fact, before I even get into this, let me just make sure that we are live on Rumble. Let me go to Locals, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. We're here. Okay, good. Also, everybody share the link out because some people might still think we're on the 6 o'clock. We're going to go back to 6 o'clock next week. It's just this week. Barnes, I think, is traveling tonight, so we had to get this done earlier than normal. Okay. Well, I had one more thing lined up. I was going to start either with Merrick Garland or with Bobby Kennedy. I wanted to start with Merrick Garland just in case we had any problems. I didn't want to interfere with this rant. Let the rant begin because it's going to involve Dr. Peter Hotez, or as I'm going to call him now, I'm going to call him Petey Boy. Because if Petey Boy wants to call Bobby, you're going to call the potential next president of the United States. It's a long shot, but I might bet on it. You're going to call Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Bobby in tweets. Well, Dr. Peter Hotez, we should just get in the habit of calling you Petey. Let's play the video, and then let's see what exactly is going on with the hashtag confession through projection that has become the life of Petey Hotez. Listen to this.
And the last one of these was in 2020 or 2019 October.
Listen to this.
And it was hosted by Bill Gates, by Fauci, and by April Hayes.
They're talking about like pandemic preparation.
Interestingly, by George Gale, who is the head of the Chinese CDC in New York City. And any of you, I'm sure a lot of you have gone and looked at this on YouTube. It's called Event 201.
Event 201. Look it up.
The fourth simulation that day, the last one, is all about how you use the pandemic as a pretense for clamping down for abridgments of freedom of speech.
So it's tough to hear anybody listening to this on podcast where this will go tomorrow. It's Bobby Kennedy at I think he had an event where there were a bunch of doctors talking about COVID and stuff. And apparently the doctors that talk with Bobby Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., they're not real doctors anymore, whatever. He's talking about Event 201, which was a 2019 prep for pandemic. And set aside the fact that we now know, according to the Lancet, it's a perfectly plausible explanation that the virus was man-engineered in a lab in Wuhan, China, and leaked. It's now totally plausible. Set aside whether or not the pandemic, the Rona, the Jibby, whatever it is, let's set aside whether or not it was deliberately set on humankind or just accidentally released and then weaponized. I happen to go for the latter. Accidentally released, they're doing some stupid stuff that they shouldn't be doing. It gets out. Well, it's accidentally released. Let's lie about the origins and let's weaponize the shit out of this people. This is what Robert RFK is talking about right now. How this Event 201, and the WEF was quite open about it. How do we seize on this opportunity now that it's out? It's a terrible thing. Man-made viruses have leaked to the public. Terrible thing. What can we do now to co-opt this, to hijack it so that we can impose our new world order, one world government? And that's what Robert, now look what he's done to me. That's what Robert F. Kennedy's talking about right now.
Particularly, how do you stop people from talking about a lab leak as the source of these viruses? Now, this in October 2019. None of us at that time ever heard of COVID. We now know that COVID was almost certainly circulating by mid-September. On September 12th, the Chinese government kicked down the door of the Wuhan lab, brought in General Wei which is the bioweapons expert from the People's Army, to run the lab and remove all the gain of function studies from their public-facing websites and all of the genomic sequences from all the viruses. The Chinese government clearly knew that the virus was circulating in September. So a month later, you have this. That same week, Bill Gates, who was overseeing this situation, made a 1.1 million shares of BioNTech back.
Bill, that he's explaining for those who can't see this or might not be able to hear it clearly on podcast. Bill Gates apparently bought 1.1 million shares of BioNTech, which, according to RFK Jr., which then, as we now know, becomes Pfizer's money bag, cash cow, golden goose.
Vaccine, which later became the Pfizer vaccine. He then sold that, almost all that stock, 87%. 2 years later, at a $242 million profit.
$242 million profit, if what RFK Jr. is saying now is accurate.
And a week after that, he publicly announced the vaccine didn't work. This has been kind of pump and dump scheme. Because he was the guy who was on TV with his minion, Peter Hotez.
He was the guy with his minion, Peter Hotez, who took $52 million.
Who took $52 million from Gates for his institution. Gates made his institution. So you had the pair of them pumping up the stock for 2 years and then dumping it a week before he goes on TV and says, oh, it didn't work after all.
That's interesting. You know who I'd like to hear on that? Peter Hotez. Maybe Bill Gates, but Bill Gates isn't a doctor. I don't even think Peter Hotez would have a public discussion with Bill Gates. That's just that was just the intro to this part of the rant. Listen to this. That's what RFK Jr. said just a moment ago, or yesterday, or the day before. Peter Hotez, in the most lacking of self-awareness form of confession through projection, comes out and says in a tweet, and this is like, now we're nearing 2 weeks after the Joe Rogan RFK Jr. podcast. We're nearing 2 weeks of out of this event now. Peter Hotez tweets, and you're going to see just how many tweets he tweets about this. It's not as fun living rent-free in Bobby's head as you might think. Bobby, condescending prick. The place is a mess. Also, our institutions, as he calls it, hasn't received Gates funding in more than a decade. Oh, interesting. Not hasn't received remuneration, hasn't received Gates funding. Okay, hey, let's see full transparency. Funding is different than remuneration, compensation, whatever, but who knows? I think longer. So this pump and dump allegation has nothing to do with funding, by the way. It has to do with purchasing stocks and selling them. Our COVID, it's ludicrous, just made up nonsense. All right, living rent free in RFK Jr.'s head. Oh, did I? Oh, what the heck, man? Hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'm gonna miss the entire punchline of this. I'm gonna miss the entire punchline. Hold on just 1 second. I gotta get you the punchline of this, talking about living rent free in someone's head. Listen, look at this. Look at this, people. The man accusing RFK Jr. The man accusing RFK Jr. of being in RFK Jr.'s head rent free has been tweeting about RFK Jr. nonstop, multiple times a day, incessantly. And I just pulled up a few. I mean, I stopped after about 19 or 20. Peter Hotez retweeting Steve Silberman. There's a good reason for vaccine scientist Peter Hotez to debate. There are no good reasons for vaccine scientist Peter Hotez to debate bozo nudniks like Joe Rogan and professional liars like RFK Jr. Oh, it's just Peter Hotez retweeting that. Peter Hotez retweeting Holden Thorpe's Science EIC. In the meantime, we can be gratified at the way scientists and clear thinkers rallied around Hotez. Look at this. One after the other. All he does day in and day out now is retweet people who blindly support him, a media that is rallying around him. And Hotez is complaining about a purported harassment campaign against him where he has MSNBC, Mehdi Hassan, Aaron Burnett, CNN, Forbes, the Houston Chronicle. He's got every aspect of legacy media, mainstream media, writing hit piece after hit piece about RFK Jr. and Joe Rogan, which he then retweets while calling them names like no good, no nudniks or whatever, while refusing to debate them. And then he says that he's living rent-free in RFK Jr.'s head because RFK mentioned him once in an alleged pump and dump scheme involving shares in the stock for a vaccine that didn't work, or allegedly didn't work after. Who knows? Oh, you could make this stuff up, but people might not believe you. Now, let me just make sure that I gave Robert the link to the stream tonight. I'm sure that I did, but I always think that there's something I did forget. You got the link for StreamYard, right? Question mark? I'm sure that I did. And now while we're waiting anyhow, let me go over to Rumble. Did I miss? Oh my goodness, there are Rumble rants. Let me get the Rumble rants before we do this, before we get Barnes. And we got a good show tonight. We're going to talk about Wagner. So I went jogging. I hear myself. Hold on 1 second. Where did it just come from? I went for a jog in the toxic air in Canada. And I was listening to a podcast for this guy named JD, who used to work with Dark Horse Allies, helping Ukraine fight Russia. And listen to a podcast of somebody, purportedly, allegedly on the ground, giving insights. We're going to talk about this coup. You had all the experts in the world coming out and saying it's the end of Russia. This is it. It's time to. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Hunter Biden's bullcrap, treating all cases equally plea deal, and a slew of other things. But let me just get these Rumble rants while we're here. Yes to Rumble. Arkansas Crime Attorney is Little Rock on YouTube for anybody who doesn't know. Arkansas Crime Attorney says, I have missed so many live streams. I hate this new job. Did you guys ever find out if locals can know in advance, maybe by email, by the next meetup? We have not determined on the next meetup, Arkansas crime attorney. Arkansas crime attorney, did you get time to find out about Miles Guo from No, I Didn't? Director, making system. Okay, interesting. And then we got Kitty724. So glad y'all have been covering RFK. Important candidate with much to say to everyone in the U.S. Could not agree more. Let me bring this out here. Let me bring this one back up. In a debate between myself and Biden, I'd kick his arse. Vote for Winston. So I was listening to a podcast. It's a phenomenal thing. This Coup, Prigozhin, the leader of Wagner, a militia mercenary group, a paid-for army, having a power struggle apparently with Shoigu, and apparently announcing that he's going to march on Moscow and overthrow Putin with his army of 20,000. And everybody, every expert out there, Vindman, every purported expert, Colonel Vindman, what's his first name? I forget what Vindman's first name is. Vindman. All of these experts come out saying this is the end of Russia. This is how it ends. There's going to be infighting. How embarrassing for Putin. And it's phenomenal how wrong the so-called experts can be. And I'm a schnook. I do the best I can. I have an open mind. I listen to everybody on both sides as I listen to this podcast with JD from Dark Horse Allies, and knowing the angle from which this person is coming, literally fighting for Ukraine. Can learn from everybody. You do learn from everybody. But watching these purported experts jump on this, exaggerate it, and be so wildly wrong within 24 hours, it's an outlandish joke. And I mean, in a way, all you have to do in order to be right is say exactly the opposite of what the purported experts are saying, and you'll be right. You'll be righter more often than not. Let me see here. Oh, here, check this out. This is the air quality in Montreal, everybody. This is the air quality in Montreal. It's smoky. It's not quite the end of times, but it's smoky. This is and the Upper Westmount. There's a lookout that overlooks the city. If anybody's never seen it, you should go see it. This is what it looks like today. This is the summit of Westmount, Montreal. There's been a shift in the winds, and the smoke from the forest fires has blown all over downtown Montreal. That's ordinarily, you can see it crystal clear. You can see windows in the downtown skyscrapers. Quite smoky. You can smell it in the air. Apparently, the new policy also is just 2 weeks of lockdowns. It's 2 weeks to end the forest fires. Everyone has to contribute their part. We're all in this together. Nobody move. Stay home. 2 weeks to put out the fires. All right. And I almost actually forgot one thing. As you came into the stream and started watching, you might have noticed it says contains a paid sponsor, because it does. And it's in the description of the link. Everybody talking about breathing healthy air, fresh air. You should also be eating healthy food. Most people don't know, but you probably do know you're supposed to have between 5 and 7 servings of fruits and vegetables daily. Most people don't know this, and those who do still probably don't do it. Raw fruits and vegetables are the best. When you cook them, sometimes you lose some of the proteins. You steam broccoli, some of the nutrients end up in that water underneath. Field of Greens is a desiccated fruit and vegetable, dried, pulverized. It contains all of the antioxidants, the nutrients of fruits and vegetables. 1 spoonful is 1 serving. You do 1 spoonful twice a day, you get a nice big glass of water. You get a spoonful of your nutrients, and it's a good habit. It's a healthy habit. It actually tastes good. It looks like swamp water, but it looks like swamp water because swamp water is high in nutrients, and it's the giver of life. And so if you go to what is it called? If you go to Field of Greens, it'll bring you to Brickhouse Nutrition. Promo code VIVA for 15% off your order, and it's good stuff. I mean, it's a healthy habit to get into. Made in America, USDA organic approved, because it's a food and not a supplement, not an extract, and it's good for you. Fieldofgreens.com, promo code VIVA. All right, now hold on a second. I'm getting nervous about Barnes. I know I sent him the link. Hold on a second. Let me just check my email. Hold on. Okay, no, I got it there. Well, until he gets here, let's deal with one more. Do we do a little intro of the bad take tweets on the Russia Ukraine coup that was over as fast as it started? Here's one. Here's one bad take. I don't know who this person is. His name is Rep. Jason Crow, and I think the only funny thing about this tweet is that Jason Crow is probably now eating crow. Just sitting here remembering Tucker Carlson. Like, Tucker, I don't know what he has to do with any of this, is like the number one enemy of everybody who supports Ukraine until the end and whatever. Rep. Jason Crow, dad, Little League baseball coach, Army Ranger, Westerner and whiskey enthusiast, congressman serving, Colorado. So I guess that might delineate political orientation. Just sitting here remembering Tucker Carlson and his minions disparaging our supposedly woke military and how awesome the Russian army is. And then he posts this picture, which I don't even understand who thinks that this is a good idea, even if he thinks that he's right. George Takei had a wonderful one. George Takei is literally an idiot, above and beyond a potential predator. Set that aside if you haven't seen the video of him admitting to predatorial conduct. You want to be right? Do what George Takei doesn't. Do the exact opposite of George Takei. Okay, I see Barnes in the backdrop. Have I forgotten anything? Yeah, we'll get to the Rumble rants afterwards. I'm not your buddy guy says, Viva, did my rants get deleted? I don't think they got deleted. I don't think I saw them. All right. Anyhow, that's it. Barnes is in the house. I don't know. Okay, he's looking good. Robert, I'm bringing. Should I call Robert Bob? I'm gonna call Robert Bobby now as an ode to PD Hotez. I'm joking. I'm always gonna call Robert because I think that's. I'm gonna call him Maître Barnes, as we say in Quebec law. He just disappeared. He's gonna be back in a second. Well, until he comes back, there's time for one more. Here, look at this. Vindman, the expert. Let's just. This is going to segue. We're going to start with Russia, and Barnes is going to give us what he thinks. Oh, no, he's back. Okay, you know what? We're not going to deal with Vindman. Robert, sir, how goes the battle?
Good.
All right, Robert. Okay, so we're talking about Ukraine. We're going to talk about the coup that was the coup that lasted 12 hours. Starting with, we're going to go over to Rumble afterwards. Exclusively, we're going to talk about the sweetheart plea deal that would be only open to someone if your name is Biden. A bunch of SCOTUS updates. We're talking something about Trump tonight. I forget what it is exactly. We don't need more of an intro than that. Robert, the coup that started Friday night, got the world in a tizzy, and was over by Saturday morning, initiated by Prigozhin, I think is his proper pronunciation, who is the leader of the Wagner group. Apparently, Prigozhin might have had some headbutting with another military leader named Shoigu, and gets fed up and says, I'm going to march on Moscow. The Russian military is not treating us properly. They're not giving us proper ammunitions. They're setting us up for failure. Before we get into any of the coup issue, a little backdrop, I guess, might be useful on the Wagner group and on Prigozhin. Apparently, I don't think it's up for discussion. He's a bad man. I mean, I think everybody can agree that he's a bad man, leader of a mercenary group, kind of like Blackwater, but I guess with more of a license to kill than Blackwater. What is the Wagner group? Who's Prigozhin? And what the heck just happened between Friday night and Saturday morning?
Well, I think much of the interpretation that ended up being wrong by almost all the Western analysts about what was happening in Russia is predicated upon some of those incorrect assumptions about who is Wagner, who is Prigozhin, who is Putin, what is the Russian military, what is the Russian state. Indeed, I think, the net effect of all of what happened made Putin's position stronger, made Russia's position stronger in Ukraine, and weakened the West and weakened the Ukrainian position at the end of the day. I have a hush-hush up on the different alternative interpretations that could be proffered for what took place and transpired. But the irrefutable conclusion is that the West has no clue what's going on in Russia. They misunderstood it, misinterpreted it, misapplied it, and reacted poorly in response to it. Same with the Ukrainians themselves. but definitely in NATO circles, definitely in U.S. political circles, definitely in the social media and other circles. The the one interpretation of people like Prigozhin and others is that he's not who the West imagines him to be. In other words, not really a bad guy, more of a marketing guy, more of just a business guy playing a role, and that he's been portrayed. One minute he's the evil villain, mastermind of human rights violations for the vicious Wagner group. The next minute, he's the heroic coup leader who's going to return liberal democracy to Russia in the end of Ukraine. I mean, the fact that you could have within 24 hours high-profile voices in the West give you both the same people often give you the two polar opposite definitions of an individual should tell you that these people have no idea who he is. They have no idea what's happening in Russia. They have no idea who Putin is. And I think Putin is using this to his great benefit. The fact, I mean, by many reasons, some of the more informed interpretations out there, there was reason to believe from day one that Prigozhin wasn't staging a coup, that Prigozhin had been a fountain of deliberate disinformation to the Ukrainians especially, but now the West writ large, in order to sucker them into making tactical errors and mistakes. And what was extraordinary to me was it kept working. People kept taking him at face value, even when. So whatever you do, please don't come into Bakhmut. You should go and attack all of our weak, vulnerable defenses along a line that goes from the equivalent of Chicago to New Orleans. So, that's where you should be attacking. Whatever you do, please don't come to Bakhmut. What do the Ukrainians do for 6 months? They go into Bakhmut, becomes a meat grinder. And during the same 6 months, the Russians are allowed to build several lines of defenses along those lines that they didn't have before, get their troops back up to the number and volume that they needed, which they didn't have at the time. And the spring offensive delayed until summer gave the Russians a huge edge. And it appears a big role in that was people in Ukraine and the West taking Prigozhin at face value. Various times in the Battle of Bakhmut, he would say, geez, we're about to get taken out. So a bunch of Ukrainians would rush in and get wiped out. And then he keeps doing it. After the Battle of Bakhmut, he's like, geez, the Russian military is all weak. It's terrible. Whatever you do, please, Lord, man, Ukrainians are just going to take us out if you do a big counteroffensive now, launch it in summer. And so they spend 3 weeks losing tens of thousands of men, losing at least hundreds of tanks and armored vehicles. They're making trade-offs like, we'll take this farmhouse from the Russians in exchange for 10 dead troops, 2 lost tanks, and 1 lost armored carrier. You would think after all of that, the West would be realized, maybe let's not take Prigozhin at face value. Let's not assume what appears to be happening is definitely what's happening. But what does Prigozhin do? Takes his Wagner troops, heads down to Rostov, purportedly takes over a building for which there's only very limited evidence. Then starts saying he's going to replace Shoigu, and has a march for justice, and drives up the Moscow highway. Putin comes out and gives this dramatic speech. This is 1917 all over again. The Bolshevik Revolution is here. The outsiders and the Westerners are trying to slice up Russia just like they did with the Bolshevik Revolution. By the way, the biggest land lost during the Bolshevik Revolution was Ukraine. Just a little historical FYI. So, not a coincidence he's making that historical analogy. And while there's no conflict going on, no evidence of any conflict, right? The so-called coup is taking place, so-called martial law is going to be instituted, so-called mutiny. There, oddly, no Russian troops are battling them. We see no actual kinetic warfare, as some of the more astute observers were pointing out. And instead, they clear the highway and they just start driving up the highway. Supposedly, they're approaching Moscow. The coup is here. Russia is collapsing. Putin is done. The Ukrainian war is over. And it's like, do you really? I mean, it's like, are you people all buying this at face value? Do you think Russia's so insecure, so weak, so ready to collapse that it's honestly openly letting Wagner march right into Moscow to do a mutiny or coup? Because Prigozhin is not just some mid-tier, low-level former Soviet criminal turned entrepreneur who's built his entire financial fortune by being buddies with Putin, who's never been in politics his entire life, never cared about public life in his entire life, never been connected to the military in a meaningful manner. He was always the face in front of Wagner. Wagner was created by Russian intelligence and the Russian military to replicate the U.S. success with Blackwater and like-minded groups. So the idea that now he's this secret, super great, brilliant general, military leader, war criminal one day, liberator the next, that with 5,000 troops in an unattacked convoy to Moscow is waging a coup. And what it did is it outed a lot of people and smoked out. It was a stress test of the Russian system to see whether the Western coup could work, and it failed. It showed how bad it was. But the fact the whole West still doesn't get it, still doesn't understand who Putin is, doesn't understand the fact there's no chance of a coup in Russia because 80% of the people love Putin in Russia because the military structure is the one he put in place. The new oligarchs with economic power are the ones that have Putin to thank for being in power. You're talking about a guy whose consistent approval rating has been over 60% for more than a year, for a quarter of a century. No other leader in the entire world has sustained that for 2 years or longer in any government in the world. And yet we're pretending he's an autocrat. We're pretending he's a dictator. We're pretending he's a collapsed idiot. We're pretending, and during this, they were inside reporters said he'd fled to St. Petersburg. No, he's fleeing to Kazakhstan. No, Kazakhstan is turning him back. No, he has cancer. Even my friend Alex Jones got this completely wrong because everybody keeps reading Western press and Western analysts. This was the biggest crock of all time, the biggest joke of a coup in world history, and the entire West got trolled into giving up a lot of intel and information that they never should have because they don't understand Russia, they don't understand Putin, they don't even understand Wagner and Prigozhin.
Robert, when people were saying he's marching on Moscow and they're taking the highways, and I'm sitting there thinking, look, it's not as though Russia doesn't have planes and they could literally just blast whatever convoy, whatever's marching up there. But so you hear that. And then you also hear that apparently Prigozhin is doing this because the Wagner group has lost, if not half, 2/3 of its original 20,000 forces, so much so that they have to go get prisoners from jail, promise them freedom if they fight and survive for more than 6 months. And yet he's going to take that, march up the highways to Moscow to overtake Putin without the idea that they just get annihilated along the way. So here's the question. People are hypothesizing that this was something of a coordinated false flag between Prigozhin and Putin. Some are saying, however, things have been said that can't be unsaid, and Prigozhin comes out and says there's going to be a new president of Russia. You can't take that back. Seriously, it's all.
Well, if you're going to stress that, put it this way: if Putin really believed he said that, Prigozhin would be in jail,
or I just say I would imagine dead. I mean, it would be easier.
Or either way, but instead he's hanging out in Belarus, right? So if you're going to get people to come out, if you're going to rat out, we now know what I suspected had put in the hush hush. At vivabarneslaw.locals.com. So if you want a fuller, deeper dive, you can go there for the broader context, the relevant historical analogous context of MacArthur and Truman that could be applicable, because that's the official narrative. That appears to be the script they're going by. You could go by, Apocalypse Now and Colonel Kurtz. You could go by the idea that he's a Western plant, or you could go by the idea that he's a Putin plant. And I explained the different alternative narratives, the arguments for each one, and which one I lean towards as being the most likely. Put it up on our board, and the board was almost evenly split, but leaned towards the Putin ploy because members of our board have followed the story in Russian news much better, with better filters and better framework, because our board's above average, than the average Western commentator. So there were so many telltale indicators that this was not what it looked like. It required everybody acting against their self-interest in irrational ways. And it's like, assume that's not the most likely explanation. But how do you get the West taking the bait? We now know, for example, intelligence was involved, Western intelligence. How do we know? They leaked to their favorite publication, the Washington Post, that they'd been telling Congress this was going to happen 2 weeks ago, which means they were in contact with Prigozhin, which means I wonder if that's where some of the $6 billion went. I mean, they're laughing all the way to the bank in Russia. If that turned out to be the case, these are people Putin is brilliantly using the West misunderstanding of Russia, misunderstanding of Putin, misunderstanding of the military, misunderstanding of Wagner, badly against the West to their detriment, to Ukraine's detriment. And what some people said, why would you do this? Real easy. If you want to stress test your society to see how strong it is, imagine if you could have done a simulated run on January 6th. You would know what to do and what not to do to make sure it didn't backfire against Trump. Here, the West has made very clear their goal is to overthrow Putin, to have regime change in Russia, to use Ukraine to do so. So if you're Putin and you want to stress test where his weak links are, no better way than to have your lifelong buddy, who you've made a billionaire, play the role. And for that, he's got to be believable. Right? He's got to go out there and say all the things the West wants to hear. He's got to attack Putin. He's got to attack the Russian military. He's got to be leading this high-end elite Wagner. Anybody who thinks he's really leading Wagner doesn't understand who and what Wagner is and who their members are. Prigozhin is a figurehead. He's not really running Wagner. Never was. He was put in there because he does his duty to help Putin in whatever capacity Putin wants. That's been his career since he got out of Soviet prison as a low-level thief in the early 1990s, started his little hot dog stand in grocery stores, and who made him rich? Putin did by giving him exclusive licenses for gaming operations in St. Petersburg. I mean, this is the Internet Research Agency guy, right? This is the guy that was trying to use a Russian troll army to see if they could have social media influence in the West. It was a total failure. Mueller made the mistake of indicting the Internet Research Agency, and whatever was in those files, they had to shut down the entire case. Either their evidence was crap or there was other embarrassing information. But it looks to me like the West got played, and they got badly played, and Ukraine got played. And while all this was going on, Russia was able to move 25,000 plus troops right into Belgorod, nobody paying any attention because it looked like they were following Wagner instead, and they just made a little detour. And he was able to restation Wagner and a bunch of troops in Belarus in ways that people think is just about a Wagner deal, not about dealing with Ukraine, and has Lukashenko come in and save the day at the end. I mean, this is so scripted. It's obvious to those who've been following Putin or Russia for any extended time period. This is a guy who has survived, who is the only modern leader in the world to take out his own pre-existing deep state and oligarchic elite, like he did in the early 2000s, and oppose the entire Western deep state empire national security apparatus successfully for the better part of a quarter century. Do you think this guy's a stumbling idiot who suddenly is subject to being overthrown overnight and is going to flee on a plane to Kazakhstan? These are people who are they're so hateful of Putin and Russia that they cannot see it through honestly, and Putin is using their hate against them.
And for those who don't know, Prigozhin, 15 years ago, a hot dog vendor, became Putin's private chef for 6 to 7 years.
What is he had a catering business? That's why they started calling him Putin's chef. He himself's not a chef. He runs a catering business. But all of his money, what Putin did is he replaced he told the old oligarchs, you're going to pay a little bit in tax, you're going to quit stealing, but you can keep what you've already stolen as long as you keep your head down politically, quit interfering with Russian society. And those that didn't end up having to leave Russia, got an involuntary ticket to Siberia for a little vacation there, or ended up dead. The rest of the old oligarchs understood, left. Most of them left Russia and just enjoyed their wealth in Europe. He created a new set of oligarchs loyal to him because he made them wealthy by access to the state. But the difference was they had to be loyal to the Russian people. They had to make money and give power back to the Russian people. They could not strip assets for Western interest anymore, like the old oligarchs did in the 90s. And Prigozhin's one of those new oligarchs. So his entire wealth is derivative. He's patriotic in his own way, but he's not like an obsessive patriot. He's never been political in his life. I mean, all of this was so obvious. The only way you could accept Prigozhin as along the scripted line he was giving was if you hate Putin and Russia so much that you don't understand them. But that's what we're seeing now with the West. All these so-called experts look like a complete joke in 24 hours. And that's because they don't understand Russia. They don't understand Putin. They don't understand the Russian government. Almost nobody running. I mean, Bobby Kennedy can be decent at times. Donald Trump, I think, has a better understanding than most for sure. But almost nobody in the West has an honest understanding of Putin or an honest understanding of Russia. And the last 24 hours prove that for the world to witness.
Let me see if I can bring up. Here, I'll bring up just a Vindman's. It was Alexander Vindman, whoever told me that. Thank you. This was June 24, 220. We've entered the inevitable. Oh, this was his pivot. We've entered the inevitable phase of Russia-Ukraine war, where Russia is losing and major instability ensues. This phase is absolutely foreseeable. And then I think his take from the evening before, which was this: Russia will be weaker tomorrow than it is today. Ukraine will be better positioned to wage war and liberate Russian occupied territory. That much is certain. And that's
what Putin's playing on. The Vindmans of the world are completely they're not just corrupt. They're not just morally misguided in how they want to use American military power overseas and of globalist ties. Vindman, for those that don't remember, was the critical person that led to the first impeachment of Trump based on false accusations, because we'll get into it a little bit later with the Biden impeachment topic. The Trump was trying to inquire into the degree and scale of Ukrainian corruption before sending them any more money or arms, for which he was impeached for merely asking the question of Zelensky. And so what we see, and like the whole story of the Russian operation makes more sense now as things have come out, that originally Putin didn't plan on a long-standing war, that he went in as a feint because he believed, based on his own intelligence, I think that some of the stories of Ukrainian intelligence officers in Russia being fired is probably true, because he thought, we'll get a peace deal if I just put troops outside of Kiev, because Zelensky's just looking for an excuse to jettison the Azov battalion and the last vestiges of the Maidan coup regime. And my troops being outside Kiev will give him the pretext to do it. He sends a peace emissary up to Belarus, who actually agrees and signs the peace deal. And on his way back, and when he gets to Kiev, somebody in Kiev assassinates the Ukrainian peace initiative guy. Obviously, that wouldn't be the Russians, because they had no interest in that. Then they signed the same peace deal, comparable. And all it basically was is, we're going to denazify. In other words, take out the Maidan coup regime elements from the military, and from the political infrastructure of Ukraine. Don't join NATO. Scale down your armed forces. Going to be multiple security guarantees by everybody. Return to the Minsk Accords that keep Donbass in Ukraine and just make it Donbass have more political independence to protect Russian people's culture that is located within Donbass. And he was even talking about, leasing Crimea rather than declaring it part of Russian territory as part of the solution. The last part, not evident that was ever part of the ultimate agreement, but that's the degree to which Putin was willing to go. And thought that he had the deal twice, withdrew from Kiev because he thought because they had initialed the deal in Istanbul, the second run around. And then Boris Johnson comes in and says no. What Putin underestimated was the degree of the Biden administration and NATO and Western Europe's commitment to using Ukraine to take out, so that they were on George Soros' script entirely. Soros has been doing this for 30 years, using Ukraine as his first place, as first template, and he's been obsessed with taking out Putin for 20 years. And and Putin underestimated that. He didn't realize Zelensky's no longer an independent actor, that the entire Ukrainian regime now is effectively a colonial government of BlackRock, who is going to own half of Ukraine when this is all said and done on the current path under current agreements. A lot of these monies that we're sending over there aren't gifts, they're loans. Loans Ukraine can't pay back except to give us all their wealth. And in that sense, it's analogous to 1917, where what happened with the peace treaty that the Bolsheviks signed that gave up a bunch of Russian wealth and resources. So what happened is, he was not well equipped to actually fight the Ukrainian war by last summer, and had to quickly make adjustments. And then they lost in those two counteroffensives in Kharkiv and Kherson in the fall that showed how vulnerable they were. Since that time is when Prigozhin magically shows up on the scene as running Wagner, and has been giving out constant disinformation to the disadvantage of Ukrainians ever since. And anybody watching it could witness it in live time. But the Vindmans of the world so hate Russia, are so blind, hate Putin, that they cannot see it objectively. So they take the bait again and again and again and again.
One of my hypotheses was that, let's just say the experts know that what they're peddling is disinformation. They know that they're making a mountain of a molehill, that it's not a real coup, but they can hype it up in short order, get everyone in a tizzy and a frenzy, much like with the death of those 2 Polish farmers at the hands of a Ukrainian missile that went astray. And they could say, look, if this coup succeeds, there are nuclear warheads in Russia that are going to fall into the hands of people even worse than Putin. It's going to be Prigozhin or Shogi.
But you saw none of them saying that.
None
of the Western experts said that. I mean, it was only independent observers that were saying it. Like that, I agree with you. Nobody sensible would actually want a coup in Russia, who understands Russia, that the alternatives in Russia are the Communist Party and the ultranationalists. The main criticism of Putin involving the Ukrainian conflict is that he didn't go in sooner and he isn't going in harder. It's nobody saying, please let's end the war. Please let's end the conflict. That's why I was curious to watch the Western response. All these so-called informed analysts, what they were predicting this would somehow be a good thing. 90% of the Ukrainian folks online were cheering it. Zelensky was publicly cheering it. And it's like, why? And it was, I mean, if you think it really is a coup, that means it's the ultranationalists who want to nuke you into oblivion are taking over. Why is that a good thing? Yet you saw nobody say that. Not Vindman, not Lindsey Graham, not Marco Rubio. No, find the established Washington political figure who said it's a bad idea for this coup to occur. We should oppose it because it means nukes are now in an unstable regime. Nobody in that line was saying it. That shows you how delusional they are in their myopian hatred of Putin.
I had one more question. Is it true, Robert, as far as you know, that the Wagner group is offering amnesty to prisoners? Come and survive 6 months and you get your freedom? Because I thought that was...
They wanted that to occur, but instead Russia didn't allow it, and they did it in a different way.
And
it is probably true that there were aspects of Wagner Putin wanted to know who was trustworthy and who wasn't. And by the way, what Prigozhin has done has outed who in Wagner is untrustworthy and who is. That's the other thing that he likely did. And so most of Wagner signed on to new contracts to be under Russian military command. Those that didn't, some of them are getting sent to Belarus legitimately. I think some are being told to stay out of Russia and not come back because some overplayed their hands. I think if you're Putin, who you're concerned about is anybody in the high ranking of the military that might turn coat, anybody in the high ranking FSB, police, press, other places that might turn coat. But otherwise, your main concern is anybody high up that's real military, not Prigozhin, but real military in Wagner. That might be a problem.
All right.
Because mercenaries are always untrustworthy over time.
Am I wrong, or was the Ukrainian army not, in fact, the one handing out, AR-15s to free prisoners?
Not only that, they released like hardcore rapists and like extremely violent criminals that were not just not just gangsters, right, of that kind. So exactly how many people in Wagner come from Russian prisons has just been a big rumor and no real confirmation of it. And I'm skeptical of a lot of these Russian-sourced informations because all of it seemed built to tell a story of, man, Wagner could be a trouble for Putin. Wagner could be trouble for Putin. If you're in the West, you better go over to Wagner and pitch what your proposal is for overthrowing Putin. And it appears we took the bait on it because that's how dumb our intelligence agents are.
All right. Well, I'm usually Putin. Okay, thank you, Winston Shittenhouse. So that ends our intro. Our intro. We're 50 minutes into this. That ends the discussion on the coup that lasted 12 hours. Okay. So, actually, Robert, one last question. Prigozhin ends up dead or in exile or disappears into the mountains with his money?
I told people before that if this thing was not what it appeared to be, that if Prigozhin was really a ploy of Putin, watch him not get prosecuted or killed or hurt. And where is he right now? Not getting prosecuted. They've already announced they're not going to prosecute him. All charges dropped. And Putin's excuse was, well, I always respected what Wagner did. Does anybody think, whether you like Putin or hate Putin, does anybody think Putin would let them just hang around if he thought they were really trying to stage the mutiny that he said they were at the beginning of the day? That, you have to put on the script in order to stress test the system. The only risk is the stress test exposes problems that you can't fix right there. That's always the gamble. But a smart politician understands that the bigger gamble is to not stress test the system. Stress test it when you have maximum control over certain key actors in the process. That's when you want to know who's going to go AWOL, who's going to stand up, who's going to be quiet. And of course, what he found is the Russian people are entirely behind him. He likely already knew that, but he got to see it in live time, to the degree that people in Rostov were screaming at Wagner, "Why are you here?" when they're unarmed and Wagner is. I mean, that gave you a sense for the public sentiment in Russia. His opponents, ultra-nationalist and communist opponents, came out and embraced him. He's made he cares a lot. He doesn't care about what the West thinks of him. He just wants to manipulate the West for the purposes of strengthening his inside Russia and his Ukrainian war. And then he cares about what the global South thinks. So he'll play that and have to manage that a bit. But otherwise, this made him far stronger internally. So it's just look at results. Also, the evangel of the hush hush. What we've been doing as part of the hush hush is saying look for certain common things. One of the most common things in a false flag or staged event is unusual lapses of security. And there were extraordinary, unusual lapses of security to have Wagner just driving around wherever they wanted. They're out getting coffee in the street, all the rest. I'm like, this is a coup? I don't think so.
All right, everybody, before we head over to Rumble, because we're going there right now, I'm going to give the link one more time. We're at 12,000 live on Rumble, plus 3,000 here. I keep forgetting to do this. When we hit 15,000, everyone pick a letter in the alphabet, just because I want to see the chat go crazy. Put one letter in the alphabet to celebrate 15,000 live before we move on over to.
And this will be our. The next time we'll have the Sunday show will not be next week, which is July 4th weekend, but it will be the week after. So then we'll have the rest of the Supreme Court cases to wrap up and discuss.
And Natalie McClendon says, Viva, the chat on locals is absolutely hilarious. I'm just going to see if we pick random letters, what letter most people randomly pick. Okay, everybody go. Lots of R's. Head on over to Rumble. The link is in the pinned comment. We're going to end it on YouTube, and we're going to get onto the Adam Schiff censure. Oh, wait until you see this article that I'm going to pull up from MSNBC. Wait until you see this crap, people. They think we're idiots. It's atrocious. All right.
And we have whether it's a crime in Arizona, according to some people, to show ballot signatures. We got Biden's plea deal. We got Biden's impeachment proceedings. And we've got trans rights that are being shot down in trans bans that are being shot down in a bunch of federal courts. Judges can, in fact, be sued for imprisoning kids, thank God. But only if done in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And then we got a half dozen big Supreme Court cases that came out this week.
All right, everybody, move on over.